Hi guys, today I'm bringing you a video on these, the 1937 pattern basic pouch. Again, doing a video specifically on different items of equipment to better show the progression of them. I'm not entirely happy, as I've said previously, I think, not entirely happy with how the 1958 pattern videos were done, looking at the components all together. So looking at these individually to see how the different components of 1937 pattern advanced through their different years of manufacture. This will be looking entirely at British manufactured pouches. There's one type of pouch missing from this, which is the basic MT pouch, which is the type that has the belt loop on the back and hangs low for use by drivers. These are those designed for wear with the full set of equipment and L-straps and so forth, Mark 1 through Mark 3. Looking at this one here, it's a Mark 1, or what would come to be known as the Mark 1 once the Mark 2 was introduced. This example is dated 1938. It's quite an early example. It still has the ballastite ammunition loops in the pouch lid there for firing rifle grenades. These were deleted, I believe, in mid-1938, mid-production in 1938, or certainly Khaki Web has inferred that because there are 1938 dated examples stamped across the lid where these have never been fitted. It's clear. If you're interested, there's a very early 1937 dated example on the Khaki Web site, which I thoroughly recommend having a look at if you're interested in British and Commonwealth web equipment, military web equipment. So this is an early production, 1938 dated Mark 1. 1937 pattern was officially introduced in 1938, but had been in production to some degree the year before. But 1938 is nevertheless an early example. I have here another Mark 1, which is 1939 dated. It is not very clearly stamped, so you might not be able to see, but it's MW&S, which alongside the Mills Equipment Company, MECO, is the other premier, the other leading web equipment manufacturer in the UK, providing supplying the army obviously during the war. Many different manufacturers, upholsterers, carpet makers and so forth would come into the fold of making web equipment for the army. But this example does show the stamp all the way across the lid there, so hasn't had the ballastite loops. So that's the two variations you'll find of Mark 1s in terms of design change. The Mark 1 did have one flaw that was identified. It hadn't come up in trials, but it was identified when they went into use, and that is that they hang very low on the belt. You can see how high the hooks are set up compared to the bottom of the webbing connecting the top buckle there. This posed a problem because they're worn around the front, unlike 1958 pattern and other web equipment where the pouches can be worn around the side. The 1937 pattern, they're worn around the front to allow the L-straps to come down and hook onto the top of the pouch. So when sitting down, hanging low on the belt, they would dig into the thigh of the wearer, which was uncomfortable. So in June 1940, a modification was announced to the Mark II design, which you can see here. The hooks are set somewhat lower on the pouch, so the pouch sits higher on the belt. And this modification was intended that Mark 1s would be modified to this design, and that future production would be to the Mark II standard. So these became Mark 1s at this point, and this is a 1940 dated Mark II pouch. As you can see there, stamped Mark II, Mills Equipment Company, 1940 in the lid there. So that's a subtle design change, but one that you can tell when you look. You can see the difference in the gap. So if you're looking for Mark 1s and there aren't any visual stamps, this is a good way that's a good way of identifying them, although obviously you might find Mark 1s that have been modified. Another point of this video is we're going to be looking at different makers' marks and things in the pouches that I have here. So this is an early production Mark II, and these would go on to be produced right the way through to 1942, when another modification would be introduced, which we'll have a look at in a minute. So just to show another couple of these, we have a L&E Limited 1941 dated Mark II there. And this one is stamped Mark II on the back, which is another place you might find the Mark designation. Roman numerals, post-war, the army would go on to using Arabic numerals for Mark designations, but during the war, it's Roman numerals. And no change to the design, just a slightly later dated example. And we have here, last year of manufacture, F Limited, 1942, the Mark II there. And again, no change to the design, just a different manufacturer year and a different company manufacturing them. In 1942, it was discovered there was a problem in that the Sten machine carbine, or submachine gun as we now know it, the magazines from the Sten would not fit into the Mark II. The Mark II is too is not tall enough to take Stengun magazines and with a closed lid, which is a recipe for losing magazines. So in 1942, June 1942, a new design of pouch was introduced, slightly modified, in that if we put the seams together here, you can see it is just slightly deeper, about ½ inch at the bottom there, slightly deeper if we put them together. And this is an early Mark III, as you can see there, in the left-hand side of the lid there, and you can just make out 42 there. So 1942 is the first year of manufacture for the Mark III, and these solved the problem in being just that little bit deeper to allow the lid to close over Stengun magazines. The Mark II was no longer to be produced, but stocks were to be used up, so the Mark II is going to be in use right the way through the war, particularly for those. There's no problem with those who aren't armed with a Stengun. It's still perfectly serviceable. It'll take Bren gun magazines, it'll take bandoliers of ammunition, it'll take grenades, it's fine. But the Mark III was introduced for future manufacture at this point. So that's a 1942 dated example. We have here a 1943 dated example. The Mills Equipment Company again, nice clear stamp in their very neat style. Mark III up the top there. And you can see 1943 in the broad arrow there. Still with the press stud and everything. The design is otherwise unchanged, just that little bit deeper. And finally we have a 1944 dated example here, which is D&M Limited, 1944. You can see the 44 there. And then Mark III there, just quite heavily blancoed this one. Slight modification to the design as a wartime economy measure. Brass was beginning to be substituted, and this one has sherrodized steel hooks for the belt there, as you can see. This dull grey finish is a sherrodizing, and when not damaged, it does provide proofing against rust. If it becomes chipped or anything, rust can begin to develop, as has happened here. But this is a 1944 dated example still with the press stud on the flap there. I believe it was at some point in 44 that manufacturer switched, not to a new pattern. They were still designated Mark IIIs, but we change over now to a quick release, and this is a 44 dated RSC 1944, a different manufacturer again. It's Mark III stamped in the lid there again, with the quick release closure. Now this design, quite apart from that change, also has the drainage eyelet added in the bottom. Now I'm not sure if this was added to some Mark IIIs manufactured with the press stud, but certainly this example with the quick release does have it. If you can answer that, I'd be interested to know in the comments, and I'll pin the comment if anyone has an answer to that, whether the eyelet was introduced independent of the quick release or if they both appeared at the same time. So that's a 1944 dated example. Again, sherrodized steel hooks here, and you can see these are quite clean, there's no rust on these. The top buckle is still brass again. But we have another example here, dated 45, even later war production, or possibly even immediate post-war. DCM, or DGM Limited, 45 in the top of the lid there, hopefully you can see. Mark III stamped very clearly there. And the back fittings are all steel, all sherrodized steel, so the two clips and the top hook, the top buckle rather, sorry, are all in sherrodized steel. The staple and the little loop for the quick release are both in brass, but the back fittings are all in steel. So that's a very late war production Mark III. Has the drainage eyelet in the bottom. It's been quite heavily painted, this, I'm presuming for film work or something like that, because it's not been neatly blancoed, but I don't know. Whether these were produced immediate post-war, I'm not sure. It's quite common to find at the end of a big war where you've produced a lot of equipment, the army tends to live off the stocks it has for a while. These, again, another point to make about the quick release type, although they're in production at least from 44, you don't tend to see these during the Second World War. The first time I've seen them in major use, in lots of photographs, is it with 27 Brigade arriving in Korea, who'd gone out to Hong Kong in 48. So it makes perfect sense that these would be in stock and be issued by that point, or very much in stock and being issued to replace other worn out items or to new recruits. So arrived in Hong Kong, they would have arrived in Hong Kong with this, obviously the web equipment they took to Korea, and the photographs clearly show quick release pouches being worn by them. Korea is another interesting point, because whether these were in production immediate post-war or not, by Korea they certainly were. I think it's a similar story to the Mark IV helmet, and they went back into production in a big way at that point. And we have here a Miko Mills Equipment Company 1952 dated example. As you can see, still stamped Mark III there. Exactly the same design as the wartime quick release manufacture, so quick release and everything is the same there. Eyelet in the bottom. We now have the catalogue number on the back there, sorry, 1495 rather, and all the fittings on this one are brass, as you can see. Brass fittings on this Mills Equipment Company. And back to the normal peacetime manufacturing, the other manufacturer we have here is MW&S again, knife 53 for this one. And this pouch differs slightly in that it has blackened steel fittings, which I can only assume is an economy measure or a money saving measure. It's obviously cheaper material than using brass. You can see they're beginning to rust, unfortunately, on the back here, but all the fittings are in blackened steel. Even the eyelet at the bottom is blackened there, as you can see. Also has a concealment element to it as well. But you can see the catalogue number there at the back. B1495, so I'm not sure what the B prefix is, if that's possibly blackened, I would imagine. Just as I've come to think of that now, I imagine that's possibly to indicate blackened fittings. But that's the two post-war examples there. So, as I say, just a look at the British development of these pouches. Things like the ballistite ammunition loops and so forth would continue to be used in Commonwealth and Empire-made pouches. So there's some variation and differences there. This is purely a look at the British design, the change to the British manufacture. It's an overview and a different look at different manufacturers' marks and things. I hope that's been of interest to people. I thought it was a better way of looking at changes over time than looking at it made up in different sets. Looking at individual pouches, perhaps a better way of going through, or individual pieces of equipment. So I hope you found that interesting. If so, and you like my content, please consider subscribing. And if you're already subscribed, make sure you've hit the little notification button, which allows you to, obviously gives you an update when I upload new videos. If you haven't already, check out, there's a Facebook page and an Instagram, both of which I'll link in the description, where I put up photographs and things of the collection and sneak peeks of videos and so forth. So it's a good place to get a heads up of what's coming up on the channel. And as I say, I hope you found that interesting. And until next time, bye for now.